Submitted for your approval. Submitted for your approval.
Another dimension.
Submitted for your approval.
Another dimension.
Submitted for your
Shadow.
approval.
Another dimension.
Submitted for your
Shadow.
approval.
Another dimension. Self.
Submitted for your
Shadow.
approval.
The Twilight Zone.
Submitted for your approval.
The Twilight Zone.
Submitted for your approval.
The Twilight Zone.
Hello, hello, hello. You're listening to a podcast not only of sound but also of mind. It's Time to Rewind is a podcast that takes a journey into a wondrous land of time loops whose boundaries are that of imagination. Each episode, my guest and I explore these time loops one loop at a time. This stop is Trapped in the Twilight Zone. And this is the first stop at 1961's Season 2, Episode 26, Shadow Play. Here with me is my guest, comedian and podcaster, Alice Lauren. How are you doing today?
But no, I was saying hi. I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. So, I'd like to welcome you to here with me trapped in the Twilight Zone, talking about Shadow Play. So, first off, let me ask you, what's your experience with the Twilight Zone? Had you watched any of it beforehand?
No, I have zero experience. I mean, obviously I'd heard of it before, and I've obviously heard of like the expression, of being in the Twilight Zone. But yeah, I have never seen any of it. I only watched it today, and very, very interesting, so I'm definitely going to watch more. But time loop, things in general, I obviously love the movie Groundhog Day. There's other, oh my gosh, now I'm totally blanking on the other time loop movies, the
There's
one that
lots
came
of it
out.
up there.
Well, there's so many now, right? Yeah, the new one, oh my God. The one in the last few years with Andy Samberg, I
Yeah,
believe.
Palm Springs.
Palm Springs, thank you. Yeah, Palm Springs, and yeah, I mean all those different time loop movies are so interesting. So yeah, but yeah, I am totally new to Twilight Zone.
Yeah, and I know this has been a little bit different for me with looking at these older Twilight Zone episodes because they really don't have a lot of repetition like the Groundhog Day. Like this episode, it just has kind of a couple minutes of the repetition at the end. Although there is enough differences that, unlike the other Twilight Zone episodes, I am giving that its own episode here this time. But what did you think about the episode in general as your first experience to the Twilight Zone?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was fascinating. It's just one of those things that you can't stop thinking about it. You can't stop. I mean, you start almost questioning your own reality. Um,
Yeah,
just I
I
mean,
guess I suppose we should actually describe the episode for anybody that actually hasn't seen it before. But this shadow play, it's it focuses on the main character Adam Grant, who is sitting at a trial, and he's convicted of murder and sent to death row. And then throughout the episode, he starts trying to convince everybody around him that they're all part of this recurring dream that he's having. And then by the end of it, we find out that he is correct, and they are all figments of his own imagination. And so that this was, kind of an early instance of, oh, it was a dream the entire time. But what did you think about that? Did you, like, as you were watching the episode, did you believe him, or did you think that there was going to be some other sort of twist to it?
no, I mean, I believed him. I thought actually maybe at the end, like this was gonna be his last loop, and he was gonna get out of it. Um, or maybe they would show multiple loops. Although I think I kind of really just saw it as like a, so to speak, day in the life, kind of thing. But yeah, I thought he was going to get out of it, but obviously the fact that he didn't, um, obviously just, keeps you wondering, connects it to the 85 version, connects it if they made a 2019, I mean, they made a 2019 version, but not of this episode. Um, so I mean, I think that was definitely really brilliant. Like you could just kind of, he's continually stuck in this dream.
I think his actions are interesting because he changes things, like he changes his plan of attack, many different times. Sometimes it seems like he's accepted his fate, other times he is just fighting everything, like yelling and screaming. Other times he's just like calmly trying to convince everybody um, that they're part of a dream. Other times he's sitting there just like trying to figure out the dream in his own head. Like, whenever he jumping ahead, like whenever he talks to the father, the priest, and he's sitting there and he's like trying to figure out like, where do I know you from? Like I know you from somewhere, but why are you manifesting in my dream right now? Until he figures out that he was like a father from his church that died back whenever he was 10 years old.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's interesting. I mean, obviously, I think of, the movie Groundhog Day and kind of, you see, especially in that longer film, the ways that he keeps changing things and he tries to, Bill Murray, not Bill Murray, but, in the movie, tries to, kill himself. And I wish that obviously there was more, that I could see of the different ways that he tried to get out of that dream because he kept acting the very same. Um, and it's interesting though that he kind of like people from his childhood, people from his own life kind of became like their faces became like other characters because if I'm dreaming of of whatever I might be dreaming of. Like I'd be dreaming of my friend, my dad would play my dad, my mom would play my mom. Maybe I would, some person I saw off the street could be, supposed to be my dad in a dream, maybe. But I feel like you don't usually have, like if you're dreaming about a person, you're dreaming about them, in their own body. You're not. I don't know, that didn't seem very plausible to me.
That
Um,
that's generally my experience with dreams too. I'm somebody that I don't remember my dreams very well. It's like, whenever I wake up, sometimes I'll remember that I dreamed, and like it's like grasping at smoke as you're trying to remember it, where like I'll remember details and then like I'll try to go through it and then it the dream just kind of fades away from my memory and it's like I can't remember anything else anymore.
it's not like my third grade teacher won't be, let's say if I was having the same dream as Adam, like my third grade teacher wouldn't be the judge, my dad wouldn't be the DA, like it would just be, however people dream up faces, you know. So
Yeah.
I found that to be a little bit strange.
Yeah, and that's the same way with me too. Like they might be playing different roles, but they would be like who they are. Like, um, if my wife was in the dream, she might not be like in the role as my wife. Like she might be a different character, but she would still like her face would be the same, her name would be the same. Like I would still know her as my wife, but it would be like my wife playing this role in my dream. And about the only
Or
other thing that I remember about my own dreams is they tend to be like very cinematic. Like I I, I do have almost third person dreams at a time where I'm watching myself in this like movie. Like sometimes it's a horror movie, but I usually know that it's a dream. Like I'm usually aware that it's a dream, and so I don't really have nightmares. Even if I'm in like a horror movie situation, it's more like an adrenaline rush, like it's exciting rather than frightening.
yeah, I'm trying to remember mine too. I mean, even I remember there were definitely ones like when I was younger. I know one, um, I dreamed that I like was in my neighborhood and there was a forest at the end and I ran into a fox and the fox jumped out of the forest and bit me and I woke up and my foot was hurting. I mean that's like the more traumatic ones where you're like that's a really weird, kind of thing. But I also remember another one and I was thinking about it as I watched, both of these episodes where I knew that I was in a dream. I think I was maybe being chased or, it was some sort of when I was little kind of dream. Um, I was chased and I was like, oh God, I gotta get out of this dream. And I started blinking really fast to get out. And then I opened my eyes and I was on a pirate ship and I was like, oh man, you know? And I just kind of was thinking like, what was Adam Grant really doing he said, I don't know, this might have been in the 85 version, but, putting, water on his face and trying to, pinching himself, all those tricks that you learn to get out of a dream. So I just thought that was really fascinating. But the idea of like, why didn't he even, if he's dreaming it, why can't he change it? He had changed, there was a steak in the oven and then there was a roast in the oven because he dreamed it that way.
Yeah,
But
I think that's an interesting thing, and it's interesting too that we do have seen, even though it is Adam Grant's dream, there are several scenes where we're following the the district attorney, the district attorney's wife, and then another character. In this one, I believe it's like the press. I think he's the press guy.
And what was Adam Grant doing in the jail when he was, dreaming of what is happening, miles away at a different house? So it's just like that's what I'm kind of like. He kind of knows all that's going on, but yet what? He just kind of like, I don't know, black out in dream and like be able to see, okay, this is what's going on at the DA's house, and I just that's so bizarre to me. I'm
Yeah,
trying to think, do I even
I mean for me,
dreams where like, oh, I'm not even in it?
yeah, for me, I don't have too many of those type of dreams, but I have had like fully third person dreams where I'm not even a character in my own dream, where it's almost like a movie is playing in my head while I'm asleep. And in fact,
Mhm.
one other one that, I don't remember a lot of details, but I remember, I think a couple months ago, I woke up and I told my wife, it's like, I had a really weird dream last night. I can't remember any details. The only thing I can remember is a monkey wedding.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, but so I don't understand why, if it's his dream also, why can't he, put his own
Spin on
things
it.
in there? Why can't he say, okay, well this time they're gonna be able to call the governor in time, or even like when you're trying to convince the DA, just dream up. All right, look, I'm gonna put a puppy in your arms. Okay, look in your pocket. There's gonna be a knife, or there's gonna be a cupcake. You can dream anything. So I don't
Yeah,
know. I mean, I don't know if
yeah,
that's
it's
how it
interesting
works.
that,
God knows. But
yeah, he does have this like one moment in the 1961 version where he shows that he can exert some sort of control over his dream because he says that, his the DA's wife was cooking steak and now look in the oven and it's going to be something different. And then whenever he goes back in there, he looks and it's a roast now.
hmm
And so that in that moment, it shows that he has some control over his dream, but that's the only time where he really exerts any control and makes any changes. The rest of the time, it's almost like he's trapped. I think even at one point he says that, he asks, "What did I do? Like, why am I punishing myself with this dream?" To where he thinks that this is some sort of self-imposed recurring nightmare that he's doing to himself, like he's torturing himself in some way.
yeah. But I also think that because they've always believed him, he doesn't have to try so hard each time. Because the other thing is, it's a little bit unbelievable that, who now would be believing someone who is like, oh, this is all a dream. This is all. I mean, who would even? I mean, they might think that they're trying to get the insanity plea, of course, but, everybody kind of, well, just about everybody, maybe not the wife, but, everybody seems to kind of believe him fairly easily, at least, in a in a day, so to speak. Um, so maybe he doesn't have to try that hard. He's like, well, they're gonna believe me. It's just gonna be too late each time. I don't have to do any theatrics or, you know, in your pocket is gonna be whatever, a cupcake, I guess I said, but yeah.
And in this version, he doesn't really have he doesn't like that's the only real method that he uses to convince somebody, as in, here's proof. In this there in this version, well, I guess he does know that the district attorney is coming around 9 o'clock. Whenever he asks, like, what time is it? Oh, the DA should be arriving pretty soon, and then he does arrive. And I like the fact that there is this level of unreality, but he actually points out this level of unreality because he says, well, I don't know how death row actually works. I only know how it happens in a movie, and so that's why it's happening in this way, because this is how I have seen it in movies, and so this is how I'm seeing it in my dream.
Yeah, you don't get sentenced and then go right into it. You have, I mean, I think I read somewhere you have to have time to appeal your death sentence. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, of course, it's very silly. It's very simplistic.
Yeah, and there's no mention at all of like who the victim was. He's sentenced to murder in the first degree, but there's no real other description of his crime or the victim. There's no like, crying family member. Like, how could you do this to my poor whoever it was?
Right, exactly. I know I read like a YouTube comment or something that was, well, the real guy is he killed his sister or something, and so now he's kind of, as he's on death row, he keeps having this dream over and over again. So maybe it's one of those, he's in jail and he's feeling guilty and that kind of thing.
We don't really get any perspective on his real life either, because he mentions that this is a recurring dream that he's having every single night. And so that implies that, he's living his life every day, and we're just seeing his dream at night. But we know nothing about who this guy is, what his job is, what he's doing on a day-to-day basis.
Uh, yeah, like yeah, it makes me wonder, right? Is he kind of stuck, or are we missing he gets killed and then it's not straight to the dream. Maybe it really is just he lives a whole day and he's like, oh my God, or maybe he's in jail. I don't know, right? If it's just like that, if he's in a coma, so he can kind of be in that like, dream to dream to dream to dream, and there's nothing in the middle. There's no day in the middle for him to go to work or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, and this is also one of those instances where we pick up, like, and looking at this again in the context of like a time loop, we pick this up where he's already been trapped in this recurring nightmare for who knows how long. Like, we don't know how many times he's done this, but we know that he's done this enough times to know how everything is going to go already. He is used to this recurring nightmare, this time loop.
Oh yeah, and the more that, yeah, I mean, he was even mouthing, everything that the DA was saying to him before. I mean, it was just, at
Yeah.
first I didn't quite pick up on it, and then I was like, oh wow, like he's right on the ball there.
I think that's just in the 85 version. I don't think that he does that in the
I was
61,
low. I
but
could have sworn. I remember it in the
oh, it,
61
oh,
as
it could
well. It
be
was a
then.
bit less though. But yeah.
Yeah, it's tough because watching them back to back, they do kind of run together because they are so similar to each other. And then, I guess I haven't mentioned that in this one, in the 1961 version, it's death by electric chair. And I think that is kind of a more common um, type of execution that you would expect in the U.S. jail system, and as well in, even if you're looking at like movies about the death row, it's typically the electric chair. I don't think that um, lethal injection is shown very often because that's not really very cinematic compared to the the foreboding presence of this big electric chair.
Yeah, I would think that even like hanging would be, the more, I guess, primitive way. Like that was kind of, I mean, we can talk about it later in the 85
Mm.
episode, but it just seems kind of backwards to me that, the, I mean, I don't know, God knows what's the more humane, way, but yeah, it seems more primitive to have the hanging one be in a later episode.
I've actually heard that one of the most humane forms of execution was actually the guillotine, but they chose not to introduce that in the U.S. Um, because it wasn't something that was done in the U.S. So they thought that that took um, that was considered unusual punishment in terms of the cruel and unusual. So they never adopted the guillotine in the U.S. But what do you think about the characters that aren't Adam Grant? Because we get a lot of discussion of what happens to us as dream characters when the person dreaming wakes up. Like, do they die? Do they phase out of existence? Like, how are they even having this conversation? Do you think within the context of this story that Adam Grant has created like fully fledged characters that live and think on their own, or do you think that they're just like extensions of Adam Grant's personality?
It's a good question. I mean, I feel like in the 61 version, you really just you don't get a super fleshed out characterization of each character. I mean, the wife, in this one, I mean, she's just all right,
Yeah,
I'm
she's very
here.
much like
Yeah,
50s housewife.
yeah, absolutely. Um, that one, I mean, I also just, to be honest, I saw, what when they showed, the house and everything, and they had, the man came over. Like I thought that was Adam at first. Like it took me a bit to be like because they were saying like each other's names and everything, and it took me a bit to be like, no, this isn't, Adam Grant. This is some other man. Who's this man? Going to this man. Who's this man? And I had because at first I thought maybe it was they were showing us like, okay, this is Adam Grant in his daily life or something. I was confused, but then
And
when they were saying
I
each
get
other's
that,
names, then yeah, I was
especially
very
with like if you're not used to watching a lot of black and white era movies and TV shows, you get a lot of the generic white guy complex.
Yeah, the generic white guy thing. I'm like, was that the guy that was on trial? I don't, I was so confused, and it took a bit to be like thank God they said their names, and like, and I'm the DA, and I'm this person, and I'm whatever in the press. I'm like, okay, you were the guy. Yeah, it was very generic, so it took a bit to kind of flesh that out.
I don't really have a whole lot more for this section. Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about for I guess the main dream in the 1961 version?
Oh gosh, I'm trying to think. I know it's like the recency effect of the 85 version kind of takes over a bit, but I know it was more simplistic, which I didn't really notice until I saw the 85 version that was just chock full of details. Um, yeah, I mean, yeah,
I
I
will
think we'll
say
probably
the one other thing that I liked that I think was actually done better in the 1961 version is whenever Adam is retelling his memory of him going to the electric chair, and it's in like a split screen with um, the camera walking towards the electric chair on one half, and then him in his jail cell in the right half, and then like the memory half also has like a little bit of like a water filter, so it's a little warped.
Yeah,
And
okay, that was excellent. Yeah, and yeah, I think the other version was maybe a bit more hokey with all the, the other prisoner that was kind of like gulping and kind of, there was kind of that subtlety in the 61 version of like you can just kind of tell the horror spreading, in that other prisoner's eyes. So yeah, I think that subtlety was definitely very interesting.
well, I think that's about all I have for this stop. Um, you know, I think there could be a lot to talk about, but we have uh, the 85 version to cover, and there's a lot of a lot of similar stuff in there. So I think we anything that we didn't talk about here we can jump back to in that episode. But I'd like to thank you for joining me today. And for anybody else that hasn't heard you, go ahead and share where they can find you online.
Yeah, so I've guested on a lot of podcasts, a lot of them being kind of those minute by minute movie podcasts. You can definitely check me out on those. You can find those on my Twitter is Pod Socialite, and for all of you younger people listening to this, my TikTok is Podcast Socialite, so you can come find me there. My Facebook is Alice Lauren for anyone who also is using Facebook. Hopefully you are. But yeah, thank you for having me.
Sure. And as always, I am Bubbawheat, and you can find me at flightstyghtsandmovienights.com. You can find me on Twitter at Bubbawheat, and you can find this show, It's Time to Rewind, on Anchor.fm as well as anywhere else where you listen to podcasts. And we have a Facebook group. It's Time to Rewind, a time loop group where you can come and chat about episodes as they're released. And also, you can share memes and have discussions about time loop movies and time travel movies and TV shows in general. It's a lot of fun. And if you are listening to this podcast on iTunes, I'd appreciate it if you give me a 5-star rating and leave a review to help grow this podcast and attract some more listeners. And until next time, I will still be here trapped in the Twilight Zone.
Submitted for your approval. Submitted for your approval.
Another dimension.
Submitted for your approval.
Another dimension.
Submitted for your
Shadow.
approval.
Another dimension.
Submitted for your
Shadow.
approval.
Another dimension. Self.
Submitted for your
Shadow.
approval.
The Twilight Zone.
Submitted for your approval.
The Twilight Zone.
Submitted for your approval.
The Twilight Zone. We know that a dream can be real. But who ever thought that reality could be a dream? We exist, of course, but how? In what way? As we believe, as flesh and blood human beings, or are we simply parts of someone's feverish, complicated nightmare?